Hello, everybody. I hope y'all are having a good day. So, do you know what? Before we get started, I don't normally do this, but I have a new student, and he was excited to see that I was a YouTuber. And he talked about in the lesson putting out a shout out. So here's a shout out to my new student. Now, the thing is, for the children, I'd never say last names. So his name is Will, and his last name starts with a Z. That's as far as I go online with that for the privacy purpose. In fact, the truth is, let me adjust that a little bit. The truth is, on YouTube, we're not allowed to have interaction with children anyway. So anybody under 13, that's not supposed to happen. And so, but that's how I get around that. I've been doing it that way since the 90s, before all those rules came out. I don't do that because of rules, right? I do that because that's what makes sense. You don't go around blabbing off children's information, even names. I figure if you don't even tell them what the name is. So anyway, here's a shout out to Will Z. And nice to have another new student. He's doing remarkably well, by the way. I have a sheet that normally it takes weeks to get through these sheets, and he finished the whole thing in 2 lessons. So that's pretty amazing. All right. So any questions to get us started off with? This is number 88. And that reminds me, I've been thinking about it all day now. You know, there used to be, back when I was living in the barrio, there was a restaurant down the street, not the same restaurant that made me fat. I told you guys last week about the restaurant that had very cheap pastor. And no, this was a Chinese place a little bit farther away from that, not walking distance, but in the same neighborhood. And they had on their menu number 88. So this is video number 88 in the Trumpet Q and A. And they had number 88 was, the name of the restaurant was Lambs. And it was Chinese food. I don't know that they were Chinese. They might have been Vietnamese, but I think maybe they were Chinese. And number 88 was what a dish they called the Phoenix and the Dragon. And basically it was like twice fried beef and twice fried chicken, right? So they fry it, they batter it, then they fry it again. I think that's how they do it. And then it was in a hot sauce. So the Phoenix and the Dragon. Woohoo! I love that. My favorite dish. And so one day when I was ordering that, the waitress told us that that's in Chinese culture, 88 is a lucky number. So we're on our lucky number Q and A today. So let's celebrate. Anybody got a question for me? For some reason, this is not working right. Let's see here. Is that better? Oh, that's much better. But now you can see all the nonsense back there. That's okay. All right. No questions yet? Come on, don't be shy. I will give you also another piece of exciting news. I've been struggling with the Trumpet Chops Master Book. I wrote all the exercises up to the interval studies, and every time I sat down to finish the interval studies, I told people in the past that I don't get writer's block. I realized today, looking back, because it took me a whole year, I realized today that was writer's block. But when I say I don't get writer's block, I'm usually talking about in my compositions. I don't get writer's block. I haven't had writer's block in compositions in my composition process for over 30 years, 40 years almost. Oh, and there's another thing I realized today that the Daily Routines book is 30 years old now. But anyway, that's a tangent. So what I did today was I finished the interval studies in the master book. That means the master book will probably be done. I don't want to promise it, but we're looking at probably a month from now to have it finished, and then at least 2 weeks or another month before the master book is published. Now, I recently went to what am I saying? I recently went to Barnes & Noble and saw that the previous book is still not on Barnes & Noble. You can get it on Amazon. And the only reason it's on Amazon now, really, is because I put the fire under those guys. I kept complaining and complaining. It wasn't on Amazon. I think it was like 6 weeks late on Amazon. And I didn't think to look. I thought, I don't know, maybe it's a different process or something. I don't know how the inner workings of that stuff goes. I thought once it got on Amazon, it would automatically spread to the other services. No, it's not going like that. Right now, I think the only place you can get the Trumpet Hymn book is on Amazon. And that's not cool either, because that's why I'm with this publishing, not publishing, but distributing with this company, is because they have all that other stuff on offer. It should be on Barnes & Noble. It should be on those other platforms, South Africa, Dubai, all those different places. There's several places in Europe that usually stock my books. So, yeah, that's a little bit disappointing. Anyway, but the good news is, yes, the Trumpet Master book is on the way. Finally, after that long speed bump. And you know what I think? Because what the Holy Spirit told me was just get the thing done, right? Stop trying to try. It's like a Yoda thing, right? Don't try, do. And so I just sat down and started entering what I had into finale. And while I was entering it, it all lit up in my head. It's like, wow, this is what I'm trying to do. And there it was. It just came out. Hello, Gabriel. Nice to see you. So, yeah. Wow, this is like the lowest participation we've had in a long time. So, let's see. What else can I talk about? If you guys don't have any questions, I'll just have to sit here and gab. Yeah, you know what happened is I went back to the other, I'm not using that software anymore. I would like to learn how to use it, but it wasn't producing anything close to the quality of this, so I went back to this again. All right. Any questions, Gabriel? Yeah, so that's a big deal, right? The um yeah, just getting through that, getting that exercise, because that was a speed bump. All the other stuff was just waiting for that. Hello, Raimo, nice to see you. Now I know, I guess part of the reason why I allowed it to become such a hassle was because I know that book won't sell as much as the others, because most students can't play that well. It goes up to high E above high C, and that's the higher up you go in the skill level, the less number of sales you're going to make. That's the the commercial um, pyramid, right? You sell most to the beginners because there's more beginners, and then you sell least to the ones at the top of the pyramid. And this is the second to the top. So I have 7 levels. I have 8 now, because I had to create a level that's lower than the lowest level. Um, that one's not as formalized right now, but we're still collecting material for that. But the 7 levels are the pioneer level, which is now this is not only about range, but we use range to separate them, right? So the first level is pioneer level up to tuning note C. Then we have the tyro level, which is up to E above that, then G above that for the player level. Then we have the apprentice level. Then we have the pro level up to high C. And then we have the master level, which is the one I'm working on now. And then above that is the virtuoso level. All right, so Gabriel says, when I make intervals, I noticed I make some micro pivoting on my lips using more the lower or upper lip. It's just a little movement. Is it okay, or should I take the same position? It is absolutely okay. I don't necessarily teach what they call a pivot system, because I don't think it should be mechanical. But that said, there are times where I have to teach it mechanically because the student thought that they needed to hold the horn static. And if you've got that into your head, then something has to be done to break that. So yes, you want the lips to move, and because the lips are moving, the instrument must adjust to the lips. If you don't have that, you're going to have certain notes are going to crack more than other notes. You're going to have a different sound in the upper register than the lower register. Um, Now, what I'm saying now is not 100% true for all people. I have to make sure I say that, because we don't all play the trumpet the same way. And there are people that if they hold it static, and I guess that's what I mean when I say I don't teach a pivot system. I know about the pivot stuff. I've educated myself on the pivot stuff, but not everybody needs that. It depends on how they play. What balance do they use, and what mechanisms do they use to create the right vibrations? And so yes, that's why the way I approach that is more, I guess a good word for that would be holistic. My approach to this is more of a natural approach. So, like in this case, Gabriel, you you noticed. The word you said was noticed. In other words, you were already doing it, which means that it's natural, right? So if you notice that you're doing this, and by the way, this is why we have that, in my opinion, that's why we have that rule that the sound determines whether or not you're doing it right. If you're getting a good sound, then you're doing it right. Gabriel now says, is there a balance among the upper and the lower lip vibration? I've never really given that a thought. Because if you think about it, that's internal. I hear people all the time talking about their top lip was doing this and their bottom lip was doing that. They get more of a vibration on the bottom lip. How do you know? You know, to me, when they say stuff like that to me, I have to interpret it and say, insert the words, it feels like they are doing this with their bottom lip, and it feels like they're doing this with their top lip. The truth is, you can't know how much the top lip is vibrating and how much the bottom lip is vibrating. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there is no science on it. It's pretty lame science if you ask me, right? And when I say it's lame science, what I mean is it's incomplete in how we would apply that to our own playing. So if you take a student, a college student, or somebody, and make them a subject of a study, of a experiment, and whether you use X-ray, or if you use sonogram or high-speed photography, whatever it is, maybe you can look at that one single person and say, this person's top lip vibrates at a different frequency as the person's bottom lip. Maybe you can say that. Have they done enough research, though, to make a correlation between the quality of what comes out of the horn and their observations? So you can't it's like what my wife says, right? One point does not make a line on the graph. And this is, by the way, the same kind of thinking that frustrates me about the COVID-19 stuff, but we won't go into that. But it is the hysteria of COVID-19 is wrapped around this single point fallacy that my wife keeps talking about. Okay? If you do a study and you say, oh, look at this, because don't get me wrong, there are studies, right? There's sonogram studies, and there's X-ray studies, and there are what do you call it? High-speed photography, where I've seen one where they drill into the mouthpiece and put a high-speed camera inside. There are studies, but what we don't have is a correlation. This is the first problem, right? We don't have a correlation between the findings and what's good, and the finding and what's bad. And furthermore, what we don't have is a way to relate those studies to us personally. Those things that we discovered through that research were things that were unknown before we had the equipment to do that. And because it was unknown, when you in every day go about your business without the equipment, then there's no way to apply what they discovered to your own playing in the sense that we're talking about here, right? Do this with your lip, do that with your lip. You see what I'm saying? So when we talk about whether or not, and this is in answer to your question about the balance between the upper and lower lip, we don't even know that when it's happening to us. We can only say what it feels like. Gabriel says, when I feel my top lip is tired, I try to move vibration on my bottom to compensate, and it seems to me that the sound changes. Okay, so what I consider that you're talking about there is I'm not saying that doesn't work. It's just not like scientifically sound. I'm okay with saying that, But like, for example, how do you move? I've been playing trumpet all these years. I don't understand how you can move the vibration to your bottom lip. You see what I'm saying? Now, but I think what you're talking about is probably working for you, and who cares? So don't misunderstand me, Gabriel. I'm not saying that what you're saying is wrong. Okay? I'm not saying that at all. We have to think of things the way we think of them. And in fact, sometimes even if we think of it in a way that's not completely accurate, scientifically speaking, right? Even if the way we approach this verbally is not 100% accurate, doesn't mean that that's not a good way to communicate to another student. I'm just very careful not to make it sound like this is as, I hope that makes sense. I don't, it's not as clear cut as it sounds. Gabriel says, I apply more pressure on top lip, and it seems to me to feel, I feel more at the bottom. Okay, so to me, that's what makes more sense. That's what makes more sense. And that's basically just the pivot. And so I know I'm on a tangent, and I understand that my tangent doesn't exactly answer your question, but I think it's pertinent, right? Because the whole idea of the pivot system is that, let me not call it the pivot system. The whole idea of pivoting is that the instrument should adjust to your needs with the trumpet. So yes, when you need the instrument to pivot more this way, because that's what the pivot does, is the pivot puts more pressure or less pressure on one lip or the other. Do we need to understand why it does that? Do we need to understand precisely what's happening inside to make that work? No, we don't need to understand any of that. What we need to understand is how much of that pivoting we need when we need it. I think we're on too far astray. We get taken too far astray from the actual subject when we get into this, like what you're talking about. And by the way, in the first question you asked about micro pivoting, I think it should all be micro pivoting unless you're doing huge intervals. That's the only time the instrument should pivot a lot. I don't know if I've showed you guys this exercise that I do. And this is a great exercise to teach the students. It's more of an exercise about how to hold the horn. But the concept is that we want to hold the horn in a way that it will adapt to our lips as the needs of the lips change. When those needs change, the instrument if we hold it this way, the instrument can change with those needs. The instrument, the position of the trumpet can match the position that the lips require, right? And when we first do this, we do an exaggerated version of it. We want to hold the horn with this as if it's a fulcrum, right? We don't want the wrist to move. And you put your lips on the mouthpiece. This stays steady. That's the whole exercise. And you do that a few times, right? You just tilt the horn up, tilt the horn down, using your lips to tilt it. Then when you're practicing or playing your trumpet, and as your lips need one or the other, you will, because you've done that exercise, you will be more willing and more ready and more able to adjust it. Now you can do a more after you get used to doing the static one, the exaggerated one, you can do a more micro version of it. And notice how the wrist stays constant. And yeah, once you get to where you're holding the horn like that, it's like, everything just pops into place. It's a very nice thing. Anyway, I hope that helps. Anthony says, hi, Eddie, and everyone just popped in to say hello. Hello, Anthony. Must go practice. Yeah, we know this is during your practice time. All right. Any other questions? I have a little sticky pad. In fact, you know what? This, I have to tell you guys, I guess we're taking next week off too, because I'm going out of town. I'm going to do some research for a composition. And yeah, so we won't have next week. I hadn't even thought about that till now, but I was supposed to tell my previous student about next week, and I forgot. So I'm using translation stuff because I don't. Okay, so that's just weird. Okay. Gabriel says, I've seen a friend of mine going up with the bell, and he does up with pitch. Well, for me, it's the opposite. Yes, that's true. Anybody who studies the pivot system knows that different musculatures, different bone structures and stuff like that will pivot in different directions. That's when we talk about an upstream player. An upstream player is someone who has the opposite of me. Raimo says, how to position the fourth finger of the right hand. Well, let me show you guys my right hand position. I'll show you how I made this position up. Okay, so if and you can't see this here, right? If you let your hand down at your side and just let the fingers go to their natural position and then lift the hand up this way. That's my hand as it is when it's completely relaxed, pointing down, right? Now, if I put that on the trumpet, there's the valves. The pinky, the fourth finger, automatically goes straight to the top of the pinky ring. Okay, so when I'm doing it right, I don't always do it right, but when my finger is in the right spot, I put my finger here, and I put my thumb here, and my fingers are free to go in the right position. Okay? I hope that makes sense. So that's how I do it. Not everyone's going to do it that way. That's, you know what's funny? What's funny is that there's people online now teaching as far as I can tell, nobody was holding a horn like that before. I started in the 90s, and now there's actually people teaching that. So yeah, there are some things out there that have become common in trumpet culture, but I have to believe, and this is not just me being arrogant, I don't think, because I've had an online presence. I've had an online presence since the mid-90s. I was one of the first trumpet players to have a website, right? So so that hand position is one of those things. I really believe I'm the one that invented that hand position. And yeah, so, and there's other stuff too, like the working backwards thing. Now, working backwards has been around for hundreds of years, but it was used as a way to memorize music. I used working backwards as a way to learn music the first time. So Gabriel says, what's the purpose of the opposite pump in piston trumpet? So that's way over my head. What do you mean by opposite pump? Are you talking about this? Or maybe one of these? I don't know what you mean by opposite pump. Raimo says, good, then I have found a good position by experimenting. So you're talking about this one. So let me first give you the names that we use in English. And not because I'm being condescending, please don't take it that way. It's just I don't speak any other language. Okay, so that way we can communicate with each other. We call these valve slides. Okay, valve slides. And that's the first valve slide because that's the first valve. Second valve slide because that's the second valve. And third valve slide because that's the third valve. No, this is stuff that you wouldn't know even if you did know English. I have to teach this to all my students. Okay? So the purpose of the second slide, so if you understand how the trumpet is built, it is impossible to make a trumpet that is truly in tune. It is impossible because not without making more valves. I might have shown you before the relationship between the valves, right? This valve, the second valve, the tubing on the second valve is exactly half of the tubing of this third valve, but I shouldn't be using the word exactly because that's what we're talking about right now. Okay? So this is, if we give them units, 1 unit, 2 units, and 3 units, that's why we can play 1 and 2 and 1 and 3, and it's close. Okay? But notice that that the third valve is, let me see, I don't want to be a fool and be wrong, but it sounds like it's actually flatter. So anyway, because the way the overtones work, these slides can't be perfectly in tune because that would put other notes out of tune. Okay, so they find a medium. And then what they do is they let you adjust, right? So the D, which is going to be very out of tune, they give you the slide to make the D in tune. Okay, then so mostly the first slide is going to be for C sharp. We will use both slides for C sharp. But there are a lot of people who will use it also on the A and E sometimes too. But that really depends on how you tune the instrument in the first place. I don't do a lot of that. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. We usually use the first slide mostly on low C sharp and low F sharp. Anytime we have all 3 valves down, we put both slides out. But you know, with all that stuff, you got to use your ears and play in tune. Playing in tune is just not pushing a button, right? So yes, Raimo, in the way we say it, the valve slides are different from, we call this one a tuning slide, and then what we call these valve slides. They're all tuning slides, right? All 4 of them tune the instrument, but just what we use as for the names of them, we call the smaller ones, we call them tuning valve slides. I'm sorry, valve slides. Gabriel says on the rotary, the third looks more in tune than 1 and 2. I can believe, you know, see, that's what I'm saying. It depends on what you're doing. So I use both. That's something I learned in the classical world, right? They will use whatever fingering makes the instrument sound best. And one of the things that I learned early on, because I went from one teacher that had one tuning system to a whole different culture of teachers that used an entirely different system. And so because I had that drastic switch from one way to the other, I learned early on that this is not, once again, it's not scientific, it's not etched in stone. It's a very personal thing. So there are times for me personally when I will use one third valve for the A or third valve for the E. Oh, okay. Raimo says that's what they call them in Europe. He says, I am referring to the names used in Europe. Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. Now, I learned something. My dad always told me that you can learn something from everybody. Right? And that's easy to do with you guys because you guys are all very intelligent. Gabriel says, can I make the first attack in classical music using just air and not tonguing it? Yeah, do you know what? Once again, I think that depends on context, right? But yes, that's definitely on the table. So, like for example, if you have a piece that requires, let's say it starts off pianissimo, and especially if you're struggling with the articulation, right? If there's no way for you to start that note pianissimo with a physical tongue, with a physical attack, then by all means you want to definitely, let's say with the Hummel concerto. So let me take a look at my score real quick. You know, it's funny. When I bought my music, I put my address on here back when I was in high school. For some reason, I thought my parents would live in that house for the rest of their lives. They weren't there for another 5 years. So I have this old address on here. So I can tell you this, we would not want to do that on any of the fast movements, but I want to look at the second movement here. Like, for example, the first notes, they are piano, right? So I could see that, except for me personally, I wouldn't do that because I'd be a little concerned about cracking the note. But if you have the skill to do that, I don't have a problem with that. You know, let me tell you about this. So I think months ago I told you guys that I bought a new vehicle, a new car, and it's the first time I've had one that you could put a USB in and listen to music on a USB. And so I've been listening. Well, I put a bunch of MP3s on there, and I've been listening to all this music. And it's half jazz, half classical, and I've got maybe, so I'm not really half, right? Let's say maybe 50 no, not 50. Let's say 45% jazz, 40% classical, and 5% South African music. Even some of the Bodo music. I even have some Bodo music on there. So like today, there's I don't know if I'm saying this right. Salt and pepper. Pepper. Salt and pepper. Which is salt and pepper, obviously. But it's Bodo music, like old farmer music. And I was listening to that the other day. It just came up on from my MP3 drive, right? But I've got South African jazz in there and stuff like that. But the most remarkable thing to me, because I have it set that it plays all these things random. I'm not choosing which comes up. It just comes up random out of thousands and thousands of MP3s. And it's amazing to me that the sound from one classical soloist, famous classical soloist, on the same piece as another famous classical soloist can be so extremely different. So, for example, there's people who I heard yesterday the Hummel, and I'm not going to say who it is because then people are going to tell me I'm a liar. I'm not a liar, but let's not even open that door. But I heard the guy really hard tonguing, right? And the whole piece was like that. And it came up on the same, another album later where they were doing the same musician doing the Vivaldi trumpet concerto with the two trumpets. And once again, tonguing hard on every note. And then you hear, and this was, by the way, it was an American, because I know that there's also a British one that tongues hard like that on the Homo, and I haven't heard him on some of the other stuff, but I know for sure he tongues real hard on the Homo. Now, I had a student play the Homo recently who was criticized for tonguing too hard, but she wasn't tonguing nearly as hard as these famous musicians, right? And so my stance on this stuff is that there is not a correct way to do it. If you get the perfect musical results that you like, doing what we call a breath attack. So what you're talking about is what we call a breath attack or a breath release. No, I'm sorry, I had it right. Breath attack. Breath release is at the end of the note. Then if that's what works for you, that's what you should do. And I am not of the school that says, well, if you're an amateur, that doesn't apply to you. I think it applies to everybody. Gabriel says, nice book. You're talking about the Hummel. I've had this now I bought this in 1980. You know, the last time I went to go see my mom, she said, do you remember when you were growing up? And I used to say that I can't have anything nice because we kept breaking stuff. And she opened her cupboards and said, look at all this stuff that I've had since we lived in Germany. Right? So she said, so basically she was telling me she wasn't being truthful when she said that. And the same thing with me, right? This book is in such great condition, being that old, right? It's at least 41 years old. All right, so Raimo says, will you please show the fingering of C major scale in concert pitch? Okay, here's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and back to C. All right, so Gary Sheen says, I like when the first movement of the Hummel sounds pompous. So hard young might make sense. A hard tongue might make sense with that. You know, the only reason we have conformity in classical music now. This is my opinion, my theory. I believe the only reason we have conformity is because the orchestra jobs are the only jobs left. So those people, because of the money, are in power, and they sit on the top of those jobs and say, this is right, this is wrong, when that's not actually true. You can do your own research, you can listen to your own. Now with YouTube, there's no excuse, right? It's amazing the stuff. I've been listening to what are they, uncles? The uncles of Johann Sebastian Bach. So it's Michael Bach and I think Johann Christoph Bach. And I've been listening to their music. When 30, 40 years ago, when would I have been able to listen to that music? Really? I would have had no access to that whatsoever. It's amazing the time we live in now. And here's the thing. I hate to be negative about this, but there's no reason to believe that this freedom of information stuff is going to last forever. So you should be gobbling this stuff all up as much as you can now. Right? You should be gobbling up all of it as much as you can now. Because the freedom of the internet will not always be free. So all the stuff that you think, here's what I do every day. And don't think of me as some paranoid guy. I'm not paranoid. I'm just very realistic, right? I wake up every morning and I know that this life that we have today is not going to last forever. The things that are good about life today are not going to be forever. The freedom of the internet is not going to last. So I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, what's the most important thing I can do with this tool that we have now? And so for me, it goes both ways, right? Part of what's important to me is sharing this stuff with you. But I'm also very hungry for those things that you couldn't get before the internet. You know, when I got into music, buying recordings and stuff in high school. I lived in El Paso at the time. If you went to the music store to buy recordings of trumpet players, you were lucky to find 2 classical recordings. One of them would be Wynton Marsalis, and the other one might be some no-name person that got a contract with some orchestra, and they were selling his music. And usually it wasn't very good. It would be like one movement from a symphony, from a concerto, basically like a compilation of trumpet stuff. But you couldn't find, it was years and years and years before I ever heard a recording of Maurice Andre. And the same thing is true for the jazz stuff. And you guys have access to all that stuff now. If you want to listen to a symphony and study the score, they even put the score on the page for you on the video. You don't even have to go by the score. You know what I have in my bookshelf? I've got the whole top shelf is scores that I bought. So I could study the scores and listen to the recordings. I've studied symphonic music now for 40 years. For the writing, right? I don't write symphonic music. I can write and have written symphonic music, but I don't because I only write music that will make me money because I need to pay the bills and put food on the table and put a roof over my head, right? I'm not independently wealthy, so the stuff I spend my time doing has to be profitable. So I hope that makes sense. But and I'm not sure how I got here. We're talking about the homo and all that. Because we're talking about how there's not a right way to do this stuff. And somehow we got twisted around till I'm talking about all that other stuff. Sorry about that. Gabriel says, Pompous is Mendelssohn. Homo is joyful for me. That makes sense. But see, that's what I'm saying. It's all personal. There's not a right way to do this. We express ourselves just as much in classical music as we do in jazz or any other kind of music. The people who sit on those top positions with power, they have power because they've got money. It's the same power I'm just talking about right now. I don't have the kind of income as they have, and I'm kind of glad that I don't, see, because I might have got sucked up into that, where I think because I'm in a position of power, I can say what's right and what's wrong. This is music, people. It's music. There is no right and there's no wrong. What there is what this group of people like and what that group of people like. And what you have to do is find what you like first, play it the way that you like it, and then find the people that like it the way you like it. That's how the business, and that's what Dick Schaefer taught me. My last trumpet teacher was Richard Schaefer. He was second trumpet in the Houston Symphony. I think he currently plays in the Syracuse, New York Symphony. And that's what he told me. He says, when you go to the auditions, it's like taking your goods to market. And he did like a little skit for me. He pulled the cart into the classroom. He didn't have a cart, but he pushed it. He opened up the shutters and he says, my goods are for sale. If nobody buys, you close the shutters and you go to the next market. That's what Dick Schaefer told me. And it's become sort of a central component to how I teach music now. You have to do it your way. Now, there are boundaries of acceptability, but those boundaries are pretty broad. So anyway, Neil Colors, hello, how are you doing? It's nice to see you again. Do you use the tips of your fingers to play or more flat fingers? It really depends on what I'm doing. I've had people put videos of me playing gigs online, and I'm very pleased to say that usually I do it right. So because I'm not thinking about that when I'm on a gig, right? So usually I do play with the fingertips. So that's my position. We were talking about that a little bit earlier. Okay, that's how I play. But you can clearly see from the patterns on my horn that I also play like this sometimes. Okay, but I'm going to be honest with you, that's when I'm being lazy. Right? That's when I'm being lazy. So, hey, guys, I see that we're almost out of time. My wife gets off at 1. I'm gonna finish your questions, so don't. I just have to get my phone and make sure she hasn't texted me or something. Okay, I'm gonna run in the other room and run right back. So that's why I did that, right? She actually I said 1. It's 2:00. She said she might be late, so don't leave until she texts me. So, all right. So yes, I play more like that. Ramos says, thank you. That's what I play with finger map I found in Pinterest last year when I started trumpet. Corona time. No local teachers. Yeah. All right. Chris Chung. Hello, Chris. Nice to see you. Hi, Eddie. I prepare Alan Vizzuti polka for my exam, but the song is very fast at 128 tempo. How can I practice fast tonguing and fingering? Okay, so my approach to practicing fast is to not practice fast. And I know that sounds, and it's funny, I even told this story 2 times this week. The first time I told this to a professional, I said, play it 50 times at 2/3 tempo. And he says, when do I move it up? When do I move the tempo up? I said, you don't. And he says, oh, yes, but when do I move it up? And I said, I don't. You don't move it up. And he says, I understand that, but it's 50 times. When during the 50 times do you make it go faster? I said, you don't make it go faster. You play the song 50 times at 2/3 tempo. Okay, so 2/3, let's do some math here. 128 times 0.66, 84. You would practice it at 84. Now, these are mock performances. So all of your preparation to get it to that point has to happen before that. You learn the piece first, but also you learn the piece at that slower tempo. You learn the piece at 84 first. This is a very important part of playing fast. And trumpet is full of these kind of ironies. You learn it, you master it slow first. It's very much like Tai Chi. I had a Chinese student one time, and when I mentioned to him that this was like, I tell everybody that it's like Tai Chi. It's not just the Chinese students, okay? But I mentioned to him that it's like Tai Chi. I've never studied Tai Chi, but I've been always my whole life very curious about it, right? And I've read about it and stuff like that. So I told him that this concept of practicing slow is like Tai Chi, and he said he was a student of Tai Chi. And he told me stories about when he lived in China, that his teacher was giving demonstrations of how he was the fastest in their whole area. He was the fastest martial arts person in the whole area. And it was the slow stuff that made him so fast. This is the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. I have my students, the first time I did 50 times, it took me 2 weeks to do that. Because it's supposed to be like a mock performance. But you're doing a mock performance at a slower tempo. So you play it at 84, then you rest at least as long as it took to play. Then you play it again, 84. And I mark this on the music. I put slash marks until you get all 50 slash marks. That's why I say it took me 2 weeks. Now, it took me 2 weeks because I was practicing something that wasn't urgent for a gig or anything, and other things, there were other things that needed my attention. I hope that makes sense. I'm not saying it will take 2 weeks. I say it took me 2 weeks. That's why it's important to mark your repetitions so that you don't forget where you are next time. Okay? So, but yes, that's my technique for playing fast. And I'm sure that's not what people want to hear. Most of the pros I work with don't believe me that this works. The very first student I had, he didn't believe me, and he actually threatened, not in a threatening way, okay, but he basically said, if this doesn't work, I'm going to find another teacher. And he did the 50 times. And then after the 50 times, he played it up the tempo. And he was amazed at how easy it was to play at that tempo. I hope that makes sense. Neil Colores says, thanks a lot. You're welcome. Nice to see you guys this week. Gabriel says, thanks for everything, Eddie. Have a nice weekend. Goodbye, all friends. Nice to see you, Gabriel. Neil Colores says, how do you practice that slow when it's higher notes all the time? As far as I'm concerned, if you can't play the notes that high at that tempo, that's not your range. You're fooling yourself if that's what you think your range is. I hope that makes sense. And the flip side of that is to say, if you're having trouble with the endurance, then what better way is there to get better endurance? Right? Does that make sense? What better way is there to get better endurance than to play the piece 50 times straight through? I can't think of a better way to do that. But yes, if you can't play the piece straight through several times a day because the stuff is too high, then that's not your range. As long as you are resting properly between, because like, for example, if you're doing a long piece, let's say the piece takes 10 minutes to play, you should not touch your horn again for another 10 minutes. And as long as you're following that rule, then the range should not be a problem. Raimo says, nice weekend to y'all. Nice to see you, Raimo. Thanks for popping in. Chris Chung says, thank you. Neil Colores says, a good answer. Javier, nice to see you. They changed time in my country. I forgot and I'm late. Greetings and have a good week. Yeah, you told us last week that they would change time. All right, well, very good, everybody. Gary Sheehan says, thank you. Well, thank you guys, all of you. Thank you for hanging out again with me. And yes, now that I'm thinking about it, we will not have one of these next week because I will be out of town doing research for a composition, okay? All right, so very good. Thanks for hanging out. We will see you guys next week. All right, God bless you.